Let's welcome back to Midpoint author, physician, former congressman, two-time presidential candidate, Dr. Ron Paul joins us again. All right, Dr. Paul, we got a lot of things to cover here today, thankfully now that the president is still going on and discussing, but let's get to you right now. I'm sure you're aware of this. On the Ron Paul Institute website, an article posted on Wednesday that talked about the French attacks being a black flag operation. This was written by someone else, not you. I want to make that very clear, written by Paul Roberts, but it argues that it has all the characteristics of a false flag operation. People are looking at you, Dr. Paul, and saying it's on your website, so maybe you believe that way. Do you?
Well, no, obviously not. And I don't even think Paul Craig Roberts believes that. I think he suggested it. He wanted a discussion, and he has some really good things in there. It's a shame that the media doesn't pick up and say, hey, you know, what about this chief investigator of this event committed suicide right in the middle of it? I have no idea what's going on there, but that to me is big stuff. So no, I think what's going on here is Paul Craig Roberts is determined to try to get truth out and get people to listen and pay attention. It's sort of like the people in this country especially have lost a lot of confidence in governments per se, including our own. I mean, we've been trying to get to all the answers of Benghazi, and of course Fast and Furious was a scandal. Nobody believes those answers. 80% of the American people don't even believe the Kennedy Commission on who killed Kennedy. So people are very skeptical, and I think this is the whole point. And of course we have Rahm Emanuel, who says don't ever let an emergency go to waste, and I think this is part of what's going on there, that this is a design to restructure and reorient people on foreign policy. I think that is what's going on. That particular day when those 17 people were murdered in cold blood and was an atrocious event, there were 50 people, and they were called civilians in Syria that were killed by one of our bombs. But it was excluded from the daily reports of the people who get killed by our bombs. And they said, well, that was a clerical error. So why is that not news? 17, I definitely believe that's news and it's a problem and you need to understand it. But why is it when others are killed and we don't want people to know, nobody even talks to it? And
well, I'll go ahead and agree with you if you don't mind my interrupting. I'll agree with you that we need to get the truth out there on statements like that. But don't you think that when you talk about helping to get to the truth, that something like this really doesn't help when somebody is throwing out wild accusations with nothing behind it whatsoever, and it immediately the people who understand the news, they look at it and they go, wow, where did this come from here? What is he, on medication?
I would disagree that they're not accusations. I would agree that he pointed out some shortcomings and wanted to ask questions and get to some answers. So yes, I think that is the case. But to say, I don't even believe he believes it is. But unfortunately, the people who picked up on the interest, they're not really seeking the truth. They're seeking to stir things up. Because to me, the big issue is why do we have terrorism? And why are we overseas? Now, most Americans believe what George Bush said, well, they want to come here, they want to kill us, they hate us because of our freedoms and our prosperity.
You don't believe
that? I don't believe that. No, I absolutely don't believe it. I believe that the jihadists are angry, and there's always jihadists, there's always wild people in every religion, but their motivation comes when, like the point I made, 50 civilians killed and we don't even care. How many people were killed during the 90s when we were constantly bombing Iraq, where there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and now there is the ISIS, they're taking over Iraq.
But isn't it fair to say,
my
Dr.
argument
Paul, that
is,
we're not doing that offensively, we're doing that defensively because we're doing that in reaction to those who come out to kill us first?
You know, well, I think that's the core of the debate that we're having, because it's the chicken or the egg. And I'm arguing, yes, they do want to come, and it's a serious threat, it's a horror. But what if there's an iota of truth of what I'm saying, that a lot of people are motivated to hate us because we're over there? What if it is true that the Ayatollah Khomeini was enhanced in gaining power and control and radicalizing Iran because we put the Shah in, the Iranians hate it? What if that is true? How can you eliminate and just say, oh, that's not a problem, they still are bad people and they're all radical? Matter of fact, the Iranians are, you know, very, very devoted to Islam. But how many people have you come across where the people of Iran are committing suicide terrorism? No, suicide terrorism comes from the countries that we have occupied, and that will continue to be the problem. It's the chicken or the egg. deciding which ones
There you
come
go.
first. I think it's a legitimate argument, but it has to be resolved because they do not come here because they think we're rich and free. That is not the reason.
We're almost out of time. I've only got 10 seconds left. The GOP brass says that they're not ready for Mitt Romney. Should we be ready for him?
Sure. I mean, we took on Bob Dole, so why don't you take on Mitt Romney? But wait till this individual senator, I think his name is Rand something.
Oh, okay.
Wait till they hear more from him.
Yeah, and that's
they're
okay.
gonna
And the
forget
next
about
time we
Romney.
talk, I'm not going to let you get away with this. I don't talk about Rand. We're going to talk about Rand next time. You're on mark now with me. Dr. Paul, it's always a
All
pleasure
right.
to have you on the show. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, take care. And Midpoint. Well, it is a pleasure to welcome back to Midpoint former presidential candidate, former Republican congressman, and author who never fears a difficult question. Ron Paul joins us. Dr. Paul, good to see you again.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
All right, well, let's just get right away to what the president said. I want to get your immediate reaction here. First of all, he is saying that he will promise that the Americans will do everything to assist the French in their effort to combat terrorism. That was, again, in his prepared statements. But on the Iran issue here, he's saying Congress has got to wait, let the diplomatics play out. But I got to tell you, and you know this as well, Dr. Paul, there are people on the other side saying all you're doing is playing into the Iranians' hand and giving them the time they need to develop a nuclear weapon. Your take on what you just heard?
Well, because I don't feel like the Iranians are about to attack us, there's no imminent threat. They don't have a bomb. They're not going to have a bomb next week or next year. The president uses language that I generally endorse. Why don't we talk to people and try to work it out? Matter of fact, he even says if it doesn't work, just give them another chance. So I would have to say from the part that I heard of his press conference that I wouldn't have a lot of criticism because I think we jump too fast and we get involved in confrontations. I don't even like the idea of using sanctions because those are acts of war as well and leads to a lot of trouble. That's how we started in Iraq. We started with sanctions and did that for 10 years and then bombing, and we were there fighting a war for 13 years and then we leave and now we're going back. So I would say that a little bit more diplomacy is the way I would like to see us go.
But are we really jumping too fast when we're talking about decades here with the Iranians where we simply haven't had any real communication, any real diplomatic solutions with them? They don't trust us. We don't trust them. They are developing some sort of nuclear power. So how much more patient can the Americans be in the American government if there is the fear that they could destabilize the entire Middle East with one push of a button?
Well, I think with the newer administration in Iran, it gives us a better opportunity. And you're right, it's been going on a long time because it's been going on since 1953. So you can't ignore the fact how this all started. And that is with us participating in a coup and installing a Shah who was a ruthless dictator and incited so many to go to radical Islam. And yes, it's been going on, but I would say there's a softer tone in Iran right now. And I think the president has an obligation to pursue this and look at it and talk to individuals and not to assume, well, these have been bad people all along. We have to, you know, this is the part that most people don't want to do, to think that, well, there's two sides to this argument. To say that maybe we contributed to the problems is sort of like being unpatriotic. But the truth is, the facts are out there that we were very much involved in trying to get control of their oil ever since 1953, and you can't change history. That's a historic fact.
Well, I got about a minute left before we take a break. We have so many other things to talk about here, and you're going to stay with us. But with regard to the Americans being responsible for their own issues here, if you will, and what's happening around the world, do you go with those people who say that America is largely or partly to blame for what's happening now with the growth of ISIS and other terrorists around the world?
Well, indirectly, I mean, they're using our weapons. So we go in and send weapons into eastern Syria and supposedly supporting rebels that we want to have them overthrow Assad. So yes, when that comes down on our heads, that is a problem. And I would say that that's not our purpose. We don't. I think it's more ineptness than a plan. I don't think we have people in our government that says, well, we need to contribute attribute is to ISIS, but I think our policies backfire on us all the time. We just can't ignore how they might react to the numbers of people, these Arabs and Muslims who have been killed in the last 20 years by American bombs and wars that we have started that weren't fought in our national defense. And the American people have been taught that we're over there fighting for our freedom and our Constitution. At the same time, our freedoms and our privacy is being undermined here in the United States.
Hold tight
it
with
doesn't
that.
make any sense.
Hold tight with that one, Dr. Paul. We're right up against a break. Stay where you are. We'll come back. Ron